On the morning of June 7, 1944, just after 6:30 in the morning, a single Churchill tank pushed slowly toward a German stronghold in Normandy. The position was defended by roughly 150 veteran soldiers, all well-trained and battle-hardened. No artillery had softened the target beforehand. No surrounding British infantry companies waited to exploit any breakthrough. Just one tank, towing an ungainly 6.5-ton trailer that resembled industrial machinery far more than any conventional weapon of war. The Germans holding this ground possessed formidable defenses. They had Panzerfaust cannons, MG-42 machine guns, concrete walls reaching 4 feet thick that had already absorbed direct hits from 6-pounder shells throughout the morning without yielding. These men had maintained their strongpoint against nearly 300 British infantrymen for hours. Yet in just 17 seconds, every single defender would raise their hands in surrender. Not because of the tank's armor plating, not because of its gun, but because of what that trailer would unleash. A yellow torrent of liquid flame that moved as though possessed of its own terrible intelligence. The fire would search for gaps, probe through ventilation openings, pour like water into every crevice, transforming their fortress into an inferno reaching 1200 degrees Fahrenheit in mere seconds. The man responsible for this weapon wasn't a ranking general or even a professional soldier. He was a 41-year-old chemistry professor whom the War Office had quietly dubbed mad. A man who understood that fear, properly weaponized, could defeat fortifications far more effectively than any explosive force ever devised. Lieutenant Davis watched through his tank's periscope as the yellow-orange flame lance arced 95 yards through the Norman morning air, entering the farmhouse window with surgical precision. The interior temperature skyrocketed from 70 degrees to 1200 in 4 seconds, hot enough to ignite stored ammunition, melt window frames, transform stone walls into radiating surfaces that cooked everything trapped inside. White flags appeared from every opening before the flame jet even ceased. The 300 British infantrymen who'd been pinned down for 3 exhausting hours rose from their positions in stunned disbelief. They'd watched artillery prove ineffective. They'd seen their machine guns fail to suppress the enemy fire. Yet this single Churchill tank, pulling its bizarre trailer, had shattered the deadlock with mere gallons of thickened petroleum. Transforming the mad chemist's laboratory dreams into battlefield reality had consumed 4 grinding years of work. Endless chemistry, bureaucratic politics, and the relentless persistence that comes from 18-hour workdays spanning between university laboratories and factory floors. In September 1940, Reginald Percy Fraser had stood before a panel of War Office generals in Whitehall's imposing chambers, clutching a sectioned prototype of what he called a pressurized flame projector. The brass sat in their leather chairs, medals glinting under electric light, while this middle-aged academic demonstrated pressure equations on a blackboard as though addressing undergraduates. Churchill himself had demanded flamethrower tanks capable of 80-yard range. The Germans possessed similar devices, clumsy contraptions used in Poland that squirted thin burning fuel streams, managing perhaps 30 yards on optimal days. Fraser promised 120 yards. The generals exchanged knowing glances. One colonel actually smirked. Professor Fraser, the senior general, had remarked, tapping ash from his pipe, "Flamethrowers are defensive implements, wholly unsuitable for tank operations. A tank requires armor and adequate firepower, not chemistry experiments." They dismissed him with the polite condescension reserved for civilians fundamentally misunderstanding warfare. Real warfare, they believed, meant steel colliding with steel, shells versus armor, not this savage notion of drowning enemies in burning fuel. Fraser returned to Imperial College that evening and labored until dawn over his pressure flow calculations. The fundamental challenge wasn't simply achieving distance. Any competent engineer could pressurize a fuel tank. The real difficulty lay in maintaining a coherent flame stream across extreme ranges while preserving ignition throughout the fuel's flight path. Excessive pressure fragmented the stream into useless droplets. Insufficient pressure produced only pathetic dribbles. The fuel required perfect balance, thick enough to adhere to targets, yet fluid enough to flow through projector mechanisms. It needed burning temperature adequate to crack concrete without consuming itself en route. He developed high-speed cameras capable of photographing flame dynamics at 21,000 frames per second, studying how fire moved through atmosphere, how liquid droplets formed and reformed, how thermal energy created invisible wind currents. Then came August 19th, 1942. Operation Jubilee. 6,000 men had attacked the French coastal town. In 9 hours, 3,623 became casualties. Among destroyed equipment were 3 experimental Churchill flamethrowers, designated Beetle, Boar, and Bull. They'd been rushed into combat with inadequate fuel, dispersing in channel winds, projectors clogging with sand, trailers destabilizing the tanks on shingle beaches. The tanks burned within minutes of landing. Yet German after-action reports intercepted by British intelligence revealed something extraordinary. Bunker commanders reported that positions withstanding hours of naval bombardment had nearly surrendered simply witnessing the flamethrowers' appearance, even the scattered, wind-dispersed flames that never reached their objectives. The psychological impact exceeded actual physical destruction by orders of magnitude. Major General Percy Hobart read those captured reports in his cluttered Lulworth office. Hobo to friends, pariah to military establishment, this 58-year-old maverick had faced forced retirement in 1940 for insubordination, only to be personally recalled by Churchill when circumstances grew desperate. He'd created amphibious tanks floating on canvas flotation systems, mine-clearing Shermans beating earth with chains, canal defense searchlights transforming darkness into brilliant day. The establishment labeled him mad as well, though his experimental vehicles were secretly training for the invasion everyone anticipated. Hobart grasped what conventional minds couldn't. Weapons functioned as psychological instruments first, killing machines second. A tank breathing fire would terrify defenders more profoundly than one merely firing conventional shells. Fraser received his summons at midnight, delivered by dispatch rider to his Surrey home. The Petroleum Warfare Department wanted him immediately, not his theories or proposals, but the man himself. He drove through blackened London in his battered Austin, arriving at the PWD's secret Moody Down facility as dawn broke. Hobart awaited him alongside Ministry of Supply engineers, Royal Armoured Corps officers, and a quiet man from Churchill's personal staff, taking notes without speaking. "Professor Fraser," Hobart began without preamble, "I need a flamethrower capable of cracking the Atlantic Wall, not merely burning it, cracking it. Thermal shock. I want concrete splitting like ice meeting boiling water. I want bunkers rendered uninhabitable, even if physically intact. Can your chemistry accomplish that?" Fraser withdrew his slide rule, calculating heat transfer rates through reinforced concrete, thermal expansion of steel reinforcement bars, standard German bunker air volumes. "Give me 140 yards of range, 4 gallons per second flow rate, and fuel burning at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for 90 seconds after impact. I'll crack anything they've built." Hobart smiled for perhaps the first time. "Then you'd better begin working. We invade in 20 months. The yellow flame lance curved through October air like something alive, striking the concrete pillbox at 147 yards. Nearly doubling Churchill's original specification, Fraser watched through protective goggles as his modified fuel mixture impacted with violent force, audible even above the Churchill engine's roar. The flame didn't simply burn, it hunted. Yellow fingers probed every crack and seam, flowing like liquid but burning like napalm. Within seconds, the test bunker's rear opening erupted into a towering torch shooting 30 feet skyward across the Hampshire landscape. Trial 47 at Moody Down had finally overcome the dispersion problem plaguing them for months. The original petroleum gel had been too thin, fragmenting into useless droplets beyond 80 yards. Fraser had spent sleepless nights at Imperial College mixing petroleum with rubber latex from Malayan plantations, aluminum naphthenate creating sticky consistency, benzene maintaining flowability through projector mechanisms. The resulting substance, designated Fuel K, possessed the consistency of thin honey and burned even when submerged. This extraordinary property emerged accidentally when a test discharge landed in a pond and continued burning for 3 minutes on water's surface. Lieutenant Andrew Wilson, the 26-year-old tank commander assigned as military liaison to Fraser's team, documented every trial with scientific precision. His reports would eventually become the operational manual for Crocodile tank forces. The Flamejet maintains coherence through gyroscopic stability, he wrote, rotating approximately 600 revolutions per minute, owing to the rifled projector barrel. This rotation prevents breakup at extended distances while creating partial vacuum, drawing additional oxygen into the flame stream. Wilson had studied engineering at Cambridge before enlisting. He comprehended what Fraser was creating, not merely a weapon, but a delivery system transcending conventional fluid dynamics principles. The manufacturing numbers revealed industrial mobilization on massive scale. Each Crocodile conversion required a Churchill Mark 7 tank already in critically short supply. Each trailer weighed 6.5 tons empty, carried 400 imperial gallons of fuel sufficient for 81-second bursts or a single continuous 100-second discharge. The nitrogen pressure system operated at 250 pounds per square inch, demanding specialized compressors only 3 British factories could manufacture. Armored fuel lines connecting trailer and tank employed unique rotating joints that could pivot 360 degrees without rupturing, a mechanism Fraser adapted from his pre-war experimental work on Lagonda hydraulic systems. By November 1943, 3 regiments had been selected for classified training at Lulworth. The soldiers arrived expecting conventional tank instruction. Instead, they discovered chemistry lessons, temperature coefficient memorization, wind speed estimation exercises, fuel mixture calculations. Corporal Thomas Banks of the 141st Royal Armoured Corps wrote his wife, "Cannot describe what we're learning, but it involves mathematics I haven't encountered since secondary school. Who imagined tank warfare would require understanding liquid behavior under pressure?" The training accidents proved catastrophic. 2 crews perished when a trailer valve ruptured, engulfing their tank in burning fuel. Another soldier lost both legs when pressurization seals exploded during maintenance. Fraser personally attended each funeral, standing silently at the rear of country churches, while chaplains struggled explaining deaths impossible to describe due to secrecy constraints. After the second fatality, he redesigned the entire valve system with triple redundancy, accepting the weight penalty to ensure crews wouldn't burn within their own weapon. German intelligence noticed increasing activity around Lulworth but reached wrong conclusions. Radio intercepts mentioned crocodiles repeatedly. Wehrmacht analysts assumed it referenced landing craft, amphibious variants perhaps for river crossings. They never imagined the British were mass-producing flamethrower tanks. The German manual updating Allied capabilities in January 1944 dismissed British flame weapon development. Following D-Day failures, England has abandoned flame research programs favoring conventional gun improvements. Production accelerated through winter. The Lagonda factory and Staines converted from luxury automobile manufacturing to crocodile trailer assembly. Women previously fitting leather seats now welded armor plate and calibrated pressure gauges. The petroleum depot at Thames Haven mixed fuel K in 10,000-gallon batches. The formula remained known only to 6 chemists prohibited from traveling together. Each trailer required 90 labor hours, components from 15 different subcontractors spanning Scotland to Cornwall. Fraser drove between facilities in his Austin, frequently surviving on 3 days without sleep. He carried slide rules and pressure tables in coat pockets, calculating flow dynamics while waiting at railway crossings. His wife Margaret later observed he would mumble equations during sleep. Pressure times velocity equals range squared. His obsession possessed purpose. Every efficiency percentage improvement meant British soldiers possessed greater survival probability during the invasion. The final pre-invasion test on March 15, 1944, demonstrated capabilities exceeding every requirement. A single crocodile destroyed 6 target bunkers in 4 minutes, traversing between them at speeds matching conventional tank turrets. The flame projector elevated 40 degrees, depressed 10, permitting shots over obstacles and into trenches. Most remarkably, the system maintained stream coherence while the tank traveled at 15 miles per hour. Something Fraser had calculated but never quite believed witnessing until the actual demonstration. Observation officers included American commanders requesting their own crocodiles. General Omar Bradley watched a concrete blockhouse split from thermal shock, 1800 degrees on one surface, 60 on the other, differential expansion fracturing concrete like an axe through firewood. "Professor Fraser," Bradley said quietly, "you've weaponized hell itself." Lieutenant Davis gripped his periscope handles as the crocodile ground forward through Norman hedgerows, the 6.5-ton trailer creating resistance that rendered steering equivalent to wrestling a bear. The farmhouse ahead possessed 4-foot-thick stone walls constructed in the 17th century for siege defense, now sheltering MG-42 nests that had transformed 300 men of the 50 Division into casualties or cowering figures pressed desperately against ditches. Artillery had pounded the position since dawn. The walls displayed scorch marks and chips, yet remained solid as mountains. The radio crackled with infantry commander desperation. "We've lost 17 men attempting to cross that field. Can you address those windows?" Davis aligned his flame projector through the periscope's graduated reticle, a system Fraser had developed adapting naval gunnery principles. Distance 95 yards, wind 3 knots from west, fuel pressure steady at 240 psi. He discharged a ranging burst, 3 seconds of flame painting an arc across morning sky before striking the farmhouse's eastern wall. Too low. He adjusted elevation 2 degrees. The second burst penetrated the upper window directly. The farmhouse interior transformed into furnace in the time required for breathing. Wooden floors and ceiling beams desiccated across 3 centuries exploded into flame. Ammunition cooked off in rattling explosion chains. Most critically, the atmosphere itself became lethal. Oxygen consumed, replaced by carbon monoxide and superheated gases searing lungs with each breath. White fabric appeared from every window within 20 seconds. Not military flags, but bedsheets, corporal's undershirt tied to rifle, anything white signaling surrender. Feldwebel Klaus Zimmermann emerged with raised hands, uniform smoldering, facial hair singed. The 34-year-old Stalingrad veteran had survived Soviet human wave assaults, artillery barrages lasting days, temperatures freezing rifle mechanisms solid. This proved different. Under subsequent interrogation, still trembling, he provided testimony reshaping Allied tactical doctrine. Der Höllische Drache, he called it, the Hell Dragon. You could fight tanks with guns or riflemen. You could endure artillery, survive bunkers, but liquid fire, it flows through ventilation slits, under doors, finds every gap. The screaming of trapped men. Once you witnessed orange death flowing toward you like water, but burning like sun itself, courage became meaningless. Warriors transformed into children crying for mothers. The psychological calculus multiplied across the beachhead. By noon on June 7th, 13 crocodiles operating with various infantry divisions had caused over 800 Germans to surrender. Not die, surrender. The kill-to-surrender ratio Fraser had theorized, Hobart had believed possible, now manifested in numbers seeming impossible. Staff officers at Montgomery's headquarters initially refused believing the reports. Captain William Belson of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment grasped what most officers missed. The 28-year-old former bank clerk had spent 3 years immersed in German defensive doctrine, and he understood the psychology that brass hats couldn't quite articulate. Artillery and bombing had failed to break their will, but something about flame weapons reached deeper into the human mind. He knew their training emphasized holding ground against conventional assault. They had procedures for surviving bombardment, tactics for countering tank attacks, disciplined protocols for enduring airstrikes. But no manual existed for liquid fire that pursued you like a living thing with purpose. There was no contingency plan for a concrete bunker transforming into an oven that would slowly cook you alive. On June 9th, near Carpiquet Airfield, Belson's crocodile moved toward a reinforced position the Germans had converted into a fortress. Machine guns nested in sandbag positions, anti-tank guns shielded behind steel plates, infantry dug into slit trenches. A standard attack would have demanded battalion-level coordination and cost roughly 30% casualties. Belson advanced alone, 110 yards separated him from the objective. He released a demonstration burst that struck the tarmac 50 feet short of the hangar. The burning fuel pooled and spread across bare concrete, flames rolling upward as black smoke rose like a funeral pyre into the sky. He held his position. Let them watch. Let their imaginations paint what that flame would do when it flowed into their bunkers. Then Belson angled the projector toward the hangar itself. Before he could squeeze the trigger, white flags appeared. 86 defenders surrendered to a single tank that hadn't actually engulfed their position. It had merely shown them the possibility of what could happen. The power of imagination exceeded the power of destruction, but German command adapted rapidly. Within days, intelligence reported new defensive modifications appearing across the front. Bunkers received ventilation systems sealed with concrete. Emergency exits tunneled through rear walls. Asbestos blankets were stockpiled, but the most critical response came through propaganda channels. German military broadcasts began portraying crocodile crews as war criminals who burned prisoners alive. Technically false, but psychologically potent. Soldiers were told that surrender to flame tanks meant certain death, that British crews used crocodiles to incinerate captives rather than feed them. The effect reversed what Berlin intended. Instead of stiffening resistance, the propaganda accelerated surrenders. German soldiers reasoned that if execution awaited them regardless, dying by bullet seemed preferable to dying by flame. Entire companies dropped weapons at the mere sight of approaching crocodiles before the tanks even extended their projectors. The mythology grew beyond reality. German units reported crocodile attacks that never occurred, abandoning positions because someone claimed to smell petroleum on the wind. Psychological warfare units refined their strategy with scientific precision. They distributed leaflets containing exact technical specifications of the crocodile, emphasizing facts that terrified through their sheer accuracy. Fuel temperature at impact, 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen depletion rate in enclosed spaces, total exhaustion in 12 seconds. Concrete cracking threshold achieved in just 4 seconds when temperature differentials reached 800 degrees. Every number was verifiable, every specification accurate. Germans could fact-check the horror and confirm its truth, which made it infinitely more terrifying than propaganda. That same month, Major Nigel Ryle watched through his periscope as American infantry struggled against Siegfried Line pillboxes designed with mathematical precision to withstand everything the Allies possessed. Artillery had barely scratched the concrete after 3 days of bombardment. Sherman tanks lay burning across open ground where interlocking fields of fire cut them down systematically. Each position supported the others in a geometry of death perfected through calculation. 2 crocodiles ground through November mud, heavy trailers carving furrows like plowed fields. Colonel William Roosmer met them personally, rain dripping from his helmet. His division had lost 43 men trying to take 3 bunkers. Artillery needed another week minimum to crack them open. Ryle studied the German positions, calculating angles and distances with the mathematical instinct born from 5 months of combat. Rain was both obstacle and opportunity. It would disperse some flame but create dramatic visual effect through steam and smoke. Instead of attacking directly, Ryle ordered his driver toward an abandoned barn 500 yards from the German line. The structure stood empty, its wooden walls already damaged by artillery but perfectly positioned where every German observer could watch. He aligned the projector and released a full 8-second burst. The barn didn't simply burn. It exploded into flame that defied the downpour, creating a pillar of fire and steam that climbed 200 feet into the gray sky. The roar carried across the battlefield like a dragon's cry. Orange light reflected off wet concrete, off puddles, off the rain itself. Within 4 minutes, white flags emerged from all 3 bunkers. 340 German defenders who could have held those positions for weeks surrendered to 2 tanks that had fired only 8 gallons of fuel at an empty building. Colonel Roosmer's report calculated those 2 crocodiles prevented 400 American casualties. Maximum psychological effect from minimum physical destruction. British operational research teams documented every engagement, building mathematical models that predicted surrender probability based on visibility of flame demonstrations defender entrenchment levels, and previous combat experience. Units with no crocodile experience showed 85% surrender rates following warning shots. Veterans from Eastern Front fighting lasted longer but ultimately showed 72% surrender rates when faced with sustained flame. The numbers revealed an uncomfortable truth. Fear proved more powerful than courage. Psychology proved more decisive than firepower. Psychological operations units refined their approach with scientific rigor. Leaflets distributed before attacks included thermal dynamics equations showing how bunker air would heat to fatal levels, how concrete would crack along predictable stress lines, how steel reinforcement would conduct heat deeper into structures. One particularly effective leaflet displayed a cutaway diagram of a bunker, with temperature gradients marked in degrees Celsius, the mathematics of suffocation calculated to the second. German soldiers found these technical specifications more terrifying than propaganda because they could verify the science and discover it accurate. Operation Clipper included 3 genuine crocodiles and 12 Churchill tanks modified with dummy trailers. Empty shells identical at distance. German units couldn't distinguish real from fake until flame actually fired. Some positions surrendered to phantom crocodiles. Others exhausted ammunition firing at every Churchill they encountered. The uncertainty paralyzed command decisions. Officers had to assume every tank might breathe fire. By December 1944, German High Command issued Directive 5144, classified until 1974. The order stated explicitly that captured crocodile crews would face execution as war criminals. The legal argument was tissue-thin. They claimed flame weapons violated Geneva Convention provisions against unnecessary suffering. The actual purpose was straightforward deterrence: make crocodile crews afraid to advance. Knowing capture meant death. 3 crews were executed at Wien. Their bodies remained displayed with signs. Flame criminals received flame justice. German legal officers meticulously documented these executions, convinced they were conducting lawful field justice. Those same records would later become evidence in war crimes trials. German precision in record-keeping, proving their own atrocities. Fraser learned about the executions in December while visiting frontline units. He'd come carrying modified couplings designed to maintain fuel flexibility at -10 Celsius, but instead found crews who now fought with knowledge that capture meant certain death. Sergeant James Morrison of B Squadron explained quietly that they carried extra ammunition for personal weapons now, not to fight harder, but to ensure they'd never be taken alive. The executions produced the opposite effect Berlin intended. Crocodile crews became more aggressive, not less. They fired longer bursts, gave fewer warning shots, accepted fewer surrenders. If the Germans had declared them outside the laws of war, they would fight like men with nothing remaining to lose. Surrender rates plummeted from 75% to 40% in units aware of the execution order. Fear now flowed in both directions. Intelligence reported German units installing escape tunnels leading away from likely flame approach routes. Engineers bolted spring-loaded steel plates over ventilation slits that would slam shut when exposed to heat. Troops carried gas masks, not for chemical attack, but hoping the filters might provide a few seconds of breathing time in superheated air. None of these modifications actually worked against sustained flame attack, but they revealed the psychological penetration. The Germans expended more resources defending against 800 crocodiles than against 20,000 conventional tanks. December in the Ardennes forest turned into a graveyard of frozen machinery. Ice expanded inside fuel lines at -12 Celsius until bronze couplings cracked like broken bones. 3 crocodiles from B Squadron sat abandoned near Malmedy, their crews having drained fuel tanks and destroyed pressure systems with thermite grenades before retreating through waist-deep snow on foot. The trailers that had terrorized concrete fortifications meant nothing against dense forest and cold. Flame projectors designed to arc over obstacles couldn't navigate terrain where engagement ranges compressed to 30 yards. The chemistry Fraser perfected, aluminum naphthenate that made fuel stick, latex that gave it body, turned solid as rubber in Belgian winter. German radio from Cologne broadcast propaganda celebrating the captured equipment. Churchill's terror weapon has frozen like Napoleon's army in Russia, the announcer proclaimed in accented English. The crocodile shows its true nature, a weapon of cowardice that fails when facing German winter and German courage. Film crews documented the abandoned tanks. German engineers crawling across them like ants, measuring armor, recording serial numbers, collecting fuel samples for analysis. The reverse engineering effort consumed enormous resources for minimal returns. Chemists at IG Farben spent 6 weeks attempting to replicate Fuel K, but natural latex from Malayan rubber plantations remained under Japanese control. Synthetic alternatives burned too quickly or wouldn't flow properly. They could match pressure systems, but not the fuel consistency that allowed effective range beyond 50 yards. A prototype German crocodile, mounted on a Panzer IV chassis, achieved only 60 yards with fuel so thin it dispersed like gasoline mist. The test crew refused to fire it again after a trailer valve leaked, nearly enveloping them in their own flame. While German command celebrated their propaganda victory, Fraser worked 18-hour days at a requisition facility near Antwerp. The telegram about his son James arrived on March 1st. Shot down over Hamburg. No parachute sighted. Aircraft exploded in mid-air. Margaret said afterward that he didn't cry, didn't rage, simply went silent for 3 days, then threw himself into modifications with frightening intensity. He developed fuel additives that remained liquid at -20 Celsius. New coupling designs featured electric heating elements powered by tank auxiliary generators. Insulated trailers with double walls like thermoses. But the real innovation was white phosphorus suspended in particles that would ignite on contact with air, creating smoke that blinded defenders while marking targets for conventional tanks. The smoke was toxic, causing burns that refused to heal, creating casualties requiring immediate evacuation and consuming medical resources. Fraser initially refused to develop it, calling it chemistry without honor. After James died, he approved it without discussion. The first 50 crocodiles with phosphorus capability rolled from the factory in late March 1945. Operation Grenade at Ulich proved flame weapons could defeat even medieval fortifications updated for modern warfare. The 13th century citadel featured walls 30 feet thick, surrounded by an 85-foot moat that German engineers had transformed into a tank trap. Artillery had hammered it for 72 hours without significant effect. Stones laid centuries earlier when King John ruled absorbed impacts that would shatter modern concrete. 300 defenders held positions that had resisted siege engines, cannon, and now modern explosives. 4 Sherman crocodiles, the only American variants built under license by Detroit Arsenal, approached in echelon formation at 900 hours on February 24th. They fired in sequence, each tank maintaining flame for 20 seconds, creating a wall of fire 200 yards wide that seemed to flow up the ancient walls like reverse waterfalls. The stones didn't burn, but they cracked. Thermal shock of 1200 degrees on exterior surfaces against 40 degrees interior created differential expansion that split rocks along crystal planes. Mortar dissolved, blocks standing 7 centuries collapsed like broken teeth. The superheated air inside created its own weather system. Convection currents pulled flame through aerolets designed for crossbows. Murder holes became chimneys. Spiral staircases that allowed defenders to race between levels now channeled fire upward like flues. Men jumped from 40-foot walls into the moat rather than burn. Others pressed themselves into stone corners, breathing through wet cloth, praying for salvation that wouldn't arrive until they raised white flags taken from Ullacombs and hidden for this purpose. Garrison Commander Oberstellenleiter Heinz Steinberg surrendered in 17 minutes. His report revealed the mathematics of defeat. Temperature in lower halls exceeded human survival limits in 4 minutes. Stone walls conducted heat like oven surfaces. Iron door hinges glowed red. Men's courage dissolved faster than steel melts. We who had sworn to hold for weeks surrendered in the time it takes to eat breakfast. Captain William Belson had participated in both forced failure and fortress victory. His March diary revealed the psychological toll. "We have become death's accountants," calculating gallons to casualties, pressure to surrender, ratios. Each burst of flame is arithmetic. How many will burn versus how many will break. I carry my daughter's photo to remember I was once capable of gentleness. The Reichswald forest action in early March saw crocodiles firing phosphorus for the first time in combat. White smoke rose through pine trees like poisonous fog, glowing particles settling on uniforms and skin, burning through to bone. German troops who had held positions for days fled in panic, not from visible flame, but from smoke they couldn't escape. The forest itself became the enemy, as phosphorus particles clung to bark, turning trees into torches that burned for hours. Fraser had given them chemistry to defeat not just fortifications, but nature itself, though victory tasted like ash.